If we've chosen to have a policy which the Conservatives have put in place to say if there are more than 3 children in the family, you won't be receiving any benefits to those children, is it a surprise that all of the increase in child poverty recently is amongst larger families? It's done exactly what the kind of chart that the minister would have been given when they signed off that policy said it would do. Lots of the ways that people think about Britain and talk about it and do their politics, I'm not sure they even like Britain very much. So a lot of the culture war, the problem with Britain isn't that our wages aren't growing, it's that apparently half the country's living in kind of, ethnically divided ghettos, which is what Suella Braverman likes to say. It's just not true. People think, Britain's stuffed. If you invest money, you don't make it back. It's not true. You get higher returns in the last decade if you invested in Britain. What's the problem? No British firms actually do any investing. So that's what we've got to sort out.
Torsten Bell, hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
No, it's a pleasure. Welcome back. For those unfamiliar with your work, what you do, tell us, and maybe tell us a little bit about the weighty tome.
The subtly placed product placement.
Exactly.
Here. So my name's Torsten Bell. Until recently, I was the chief executive of the Resolution Foundation, which is an economics research charity focused on low and middle income household living standards. And after 9 years there, 2 things have happened. One, I've written it all down in a book.
Wow.
I know you're very excited.
Very much so.
You've had the PDF.
Yes.
So you know what's
I can't wait. Well, I would take this copy off you.
This is my only copy. You can't steal this.
So I'm not sure we can have that one.
Anyway, this is a book about the hole Britain's in and how we get out of it. Now, there's multiple holes, but this is on the economic hole. Other people can write the books on the constitution and the rest. What do we do to get people's wages up? What do we do to make sure we get poverty and inequality down? So that's what's in the book, out in middle of June. But I've also recently decided that it's time to not just write and to do. So I'm a Labour candidate in Swansea West.
I would say possibly fortuitous timing that this text, this tome, which you could possibly describe as an unofficial economic manifesto.
Fortuitous for who?
Well,
my life would definitely be easier with an October election.
I think that would be the case.
You don't get to choose what life looks like.
You don't. No, that's a good point. Nonetheless, to have this, like I said, sort of unofficial manifesto for the economic side of things, and to very soon have the opportunity, you already to have the opportunity to go out and make the arguments, whether it's in Swansea, whether it's, if you're successful in the election, in Parliament, the two do kind of marry a little bit, don't they? Yeah,
I mean, look, my pitch to voters is I spent a lot of time thinking about what the country needs, what Swansea needs, and in the end, you can make a difference by writing, but in the end, there's a reason why we're a democracy, and in the end, you need to get elected if you want things done.
Yeah. Did you have it, when you were writing it, were you thinking, I know you've previously been in government, and Resolution Foundation, I think you would say the sort of reports you guys put out, very practical minded. Obviously, it's about changing policy. I think previous interviews with us, you kind of mentioned getting better at the 1% every day, just incremental change, right?
That is what we need.
Yeah?
I mean, if we can have 10% better in a day, that'd be nice too.
Yeah.
But what Britain needs to do is to get on with concrete changes that day after day after day move us back in the right direction. And that's obviously not what we've been doing for the last few years. And actually, that's not actually just for economic reasons. I mean, for economic reasons, yes, lots of the changes you need to make are small and incremental and they add up over time. But actually for political reasons too, not party politics, but just for where people are right now, is that they've been through a long, tough time. Haven't seen their wages grow since 2008. They're seeing their public services in trouble. Literally every doorstep you knock on, you will hear about potholes. Again, I'm sure that's true for every candidate of all political parties. And the danger of that is that it starts to undermine people's confidence, not just that things haven't gone well, but they can't get better. And that is a really dangerous place for politics to be. So, and that's a large motivation for writing this book, which is to say, look, we are in enough of a hole now. It's really important, not just for our wages and our living standards, although those are really important, but we have got to start proving to people that this is a country that can go forward.
Key areas of concern, key areas for improvement. Where do you see, if I know it's not a catch-all, we just do this and amazing, our lives will be a million times better. What do you identify in the book? What do you talk about? What's important to you?
That is a big question, and I'll try not to give a long list of answers. I mean, why don't we talk a bit about approach, and then I'll give you one really concrete thing we've got to start focusing on. So the argument in the book is the problem facing Britain is that we are, and have been for 40 years, too unequal. We're the most unequal large economy in Europe. And then for the last 15 years, we've been stagnant. Low growth, no wage growth, And I know it's popular to say I'm a degrowther. We don't want the economy to grow. Who needs that? It doesn't help ordinary people, but that is garbage. We do need the economy to grow, and the fact that we haven't been growing is why, when the energy crisis hits, we end up with food bank queues going through the roof. So the diagnosis is those two things are going on, and if you put those two things together, the high inequality and the low growth, then it is a disaster for lower income households. That's why our poorer households are a quarter poorer than their French and German equivalents. That's £4,000 a year. That's why you can't afford a £1,000 rise in an energy bill. So that's the problem statement, with some extra stuff on how that plays out across generations, where in general, younger generations have borne the brunt. I don't want to say all of that, because older generations, and the book goes into this in quite some detail, like who's living with those 7.5 million people sitting on NHS waiting lists. Okay, all ages, but disproportionately older generations, because I've got some bad news, which is we break more as we get older, and so it is older generations that lose out most when we stuff public services. So a bit of that's the problem statement, and obviously growing the economy is how we make sure we can fund those public services in future. Then on the approach, the book, hopefully without annoying too many people, suggests that we're not serious about turning that around. That we're not serious in a number of different ways. We're not serious partly because lots of the ways that people think about Britain and talk about it and do their politics, I'm not sure they even like Britain very much. So a lot of the culture war, the problem with Britain isn't that our wages aren't growing, it's that apparently half the country's living in kind of, ethnically divided ghettos, which is what Suella Braverman likes to say. It's just not true. So the book goes through the facts and says, look, that isn't true. It also says, if that's your politics, you're going to lose. And the reason you're going to lose is because the country isn't actually divided on those things, except for some minor issues. But on the big stuff, if you look at polls out over the last few weeks on, where's the country got better or worse over time, I've got some bad news. Most of it's worse. And it's definitely worse on all the economic bread and butter stuff, which is what I'm actually about in the end. You want a politics of jobs and houses, that's what matters. But where's the country got better? Gay rights. When I was a kid at school, and I go into this a bit, people weren't walking around holding hands if they were of the same sex. In fact, I don't think anyone was actually out at my school, and that's because there was a lot of prejudice around. And on those things have changed way faster. So there's things to be optimistic about, and if you think your politics is about fighting against those things, you're going to lose, is probably what it says. Then one big answer, there's one thing people take away, hopefully, from the book, and there's quite a lot of pages, so hopefully they can manage more than one, and I've got total faith in the British public to get more than one. But if there's one, then it's that we can't carry on being a country that just lives off our past. We are going to have to invest in our future. So I'll give you one, and you can see that all over the place. I mentioned the potholes as a symbol of our decline, but water, right? So we all, anyone who reads the Guardian, or actually most of the papers these days, will be used to being told, lots of our rivers are polluted. It's hard to swim in them, and I've had personal experience of that, swimming in some unpleasant Kent water, leading to significant bowel problems, which I won't go into any more detail.
Thank you.
That's fine. So, I want to protect you and your but that's bad.
Yeah,
but
it is bad.
But I'll give you another fact that has stood out for me and starts one of the chapters in the book, which is, if you look at British reservoirs, we used to build several reservoirs a year, sometimes running basically from 1850 right the way through to 1990. And that included in the wars. Right? We opened reservoirs, including huge ones like Lady Bower in Derbyshire. We opened it during the Second World War. Right? We could manage that. Since 1990, we have not built one large reservoir in this country. What's happened to the population since 1990? It's gone up by 10 million people. And we have not managed to build one. And that's just one symbol. You see the same thing if we look at the energy system. Like, why are we struggling so much to make sure we can build out this renewable energy that we need and to connect it to the grid? Because we've not been investing in the grid for decades, because we told ourselves, oh, no, we're really clever. We're just going to live off the past investment. We'll sweat those assets, which made sense if you owned some of those assets, but we don't need to invest. And now we're in a big hole. And the same applies to British firms. If you look at British firms, if they invest, actually they make bigger profits, bigger returns on those investments than you see in France, Germany, and the US, which I don't think people would think. People think, oh, Britain's stuffed. If you invest money, you don't make it back. It's not true. You get higher returns in the last decade if you invested in Britain. What's the problem? No British firms actually do any investing. So that's what we've got to sort out. Public investment, private investment, regulated utilities investment. And if you don't do that, well, then you're kissing your future goodbye. It's
really interesting. There's so much in that answer that I want to get into. On the one hand, maybe this is where we'll go. You spoke about resisting that urge to kind of introduce a fault line between, let's say, young and old. Failure to build housing, I think, is And it's not as simple as building more houses. It's obviously it's planning reform.
But that would help a lot.
It would, yeah.
That would help a lot.
It would help a lot. We can get into that perhaps, but nonetheless, I find myself having this tendency, right, to almost analyse British politics between this kind of like wage class and asset class, right? And it's probably because I'm part of that young professional grouping where I look at my peers who can't afford houses. We all know the stats about how unaffordable housing is at the moment. It's how do you resist the temptation to look at an issue like that and perhaps not necessarily go, this is a young versus old problem. This is just a technocrat, build more houses, change planning laws, more grants for local authorities to build council houses. How do you resist that kind of sort of politicisation or kind of introduction of a fault line between demographics of people?
That's a really good question. In terms of, I think a good starting point is how do people think about it, and then and at least listening to that before you decide how you think about it. So people don't generally think about it as a thing of young versus old. I think a better way, but that doesn't mean there aren't elements of that. So I think a better way to think about it is, what's the priority? Like, where are the problems growing? Where are they greatest? And then the point you're making, which is, if you are asset poor in Britain, it has become more difficult. And if you were already asset rich, well, then there have been some upsides recently. And that isn't about young versus old. It's just about who has Britain happened to have done better for over recent years. And policymakers need that in their head. Like, I'll give you a concrete example. In the 1990s, if you asked people that were concerned, like me, with what was going on with poverty, they would have said, look, there's two big problems. There's pensioner poverty. 40% of pensioners were in poverty in the 1990s. And there's child poverty. About 35% of children were in poverty in the 1990s. If you look at kind of what people who were doing my kind of work in those times, that's what we would have said. They would have said, government needs to focus on these two problems. We've got to bring these two things down. We can't have pensioners dying because they're not turning off their heating, and we can't have children growing up in poverty. Wind forward 30 years, pensioner poverty is basically halved over that time period, which is great. Which is really important. It's not just about assets, but a lot of it is to do with assets, but it's also to do with private pensions are bigger, more pensioners are working later, and it's great that we have longer lives. I care about living standards. I talk about those in pounds and pence terms, but definitely a longer life is generally
100%.
That's definitely living standards. We'd all like that. It's literally living.
Yeah.
So there's good news there, but child poverty is not budged basically at all. Came down a bit in the 2000s, comes down a bit during the financial crisis, then it basically rises slowly back to where it started. So we've made basically zero progress. 1 in 5 children in Swansea are growing up in poverty today. So that is not what we are aiming to achieve. So our policymakers, it's not about saying, right, well, we're anti the old people who are no longer in poverty. It's about saying what we're doing about, how have we prioritised, and is our prioritisation of issues based on the evidence rather than based on something else. And the evidence would say, when it comes to the economics, we do need to worry particularly about younger generations, and we can see that on assets, which basically means home ownership and pensions. The other assets, cars are important, but we basically mean home ownership and pensions. That's what we should focus on. And when it comes to older people, then our public service collapsing is terrible. We did a poll for this book on, do you think Britain's doing great? And I think you'd probably be surprised by this. Older people were more likely to think it wasn't going great than younger people, by quite a bit. Now, everyone thinks it's going terribly, right? Young, old, Tory voter, Labour voter, rich and poor. Everyone thinks things are going bad. Nobody thinks Britain is going great.
Gangbusters, I think, to coin a
gangbusters, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
That was Rishi Sunak's phrase. Yeah, the economy is not going gangbusters because anyone who's lived in it and got paid a wage or gone shopping will have noticed that over the recent past. So it's not going great. But if you then ask them, what do they want done about it? Maybe we can come back to this a bit. But public services is the top thing, particularly for older voters, but not only for them. So we don't need. It's not a young versus old war. It's a, what are we about? What does the country need fixing? And right now, we need to fix the economy for younger people. We need to fix public services for older generations.
Let's dial into child poverty then, seeing as you mentioned it. How do we go about addressing that? It's damning, the stat you just gave, right? That essentially there's been no movement on it. You would think it's an issue of ginormous national importance. It
definitely should be, but I don't think it has been at the centre of our politics for quite a long time.
So what sort of policy levers do you think we should pull? How do we make, again, to go back to your theme of kind of 1% incremental, how do we fix it?
How do we fix that? So across, let's do what are the building blocks of a strategy to bring down child poverty? So some things. So let's do the world of work. Okay, so most children growing up in poverty are now in working households. And there's some things that have obviously gone well. So a higher minimum wage has been a big feature, including under Conservative governments recently. And that's to be celebrated even by somebody running for office against them right now. So big increases in the minimum wage since 2016 in particular, but in general, 25 years of the minimum wage has made a huge difference. So if you were on the minimum wage in 2000, the minimum wage has risen significantly faster than inflation since then. You will be earning, if you're a full-time worker, £9,000 more a year because the minimum wage has increased. Which, remember, loads of people, including the CBI and bits of the Conservative Party, said this was completely impossible. We should never do this. It will cost jobs. Total nonsense.
You hear it again when it gets talked about raised, right?
Right,
we
exactly.
can't afford this every time.
And it has been, I'm not saying there's no limit to it. I'm enough of a technocrat to think we should do it sensibly. People like me should keep monitoring whether there are any effects. But the only effects so far are a complete triumph. Right? So we do need to keep improving the world of work. Right now, I would say, as well as, I'm sure keeping on increasing the minimum wage, but the most important thing is to broaden out what a good work strategy looks like. So not just about how much you earn each hour, but we've got to care about how much people take home each week. Because that's what you live on. Your living standard is your weekly pay, or if you're middle class or upper class, probably you think about it as your monthly pay. But right, so the number of hours you work and the security of those hours makes a huge difference. So until recently, I had a very stable job where I would know what I'm going to earn each month. I've got quite a lot of control over when I do that work. Not total. You might be unreasonable when I have to come in and see you, but generally, I've got quite a lot of control. If I'm sick for a day, I know I'll get paid in full. If I've got a problem with my kids for a day, I can probably... none of those things are true for lower earners. And now some of those things are difficult to fix. If you're working in Tesco and you don't turn up for the day, you're probably not going to get paid. But some of them we can do something about. So we shouldn't be having people being left on 0 hours contracts if they are actually working 20 hours a week. The contract should reflect the actual hours they work, so they have the certainty and they can plan on that basis. And if they can plan on that basis, they might be able to do extra hours, because they're not trying to wrestle with, I don't know whether I'm going to have these hours from this employer. And people raise that all the time. I'll give you another example. People need advance notice of their shift patterns. Why is it legal in Britain to give someone a few hours notice of their shift? Well, I couldn't live like that. So, these are bread and butter issues. I'll give you another one, and I hope this will be in the Labour manifesto when it comes out in a few weeks, but sick pay. Who doesn't get sick pay in Britain? The lowest earners, right? Who, if I'm sick, I get paid in full. The lowest earners in Britain don't get anything for the first 3 days. You'll be living on less than £50 a week if your first week of ill, if you're a lower earner, right? You're not paying your rent on that. So there's the world of work, good work is a really important part of it. And then you come to the benefit system, and it does make a big difference. And there are big trade-offs here. None of this comes cheap, but in the end, if we've chosen to have a policy which the Conservatives have put in place to say if there are more than 3 children in the family, you won't be receiving any benefits to those children. Is it a surprise that all of the increase in child poverty recently is amongst larger families? It's done exactly what the kind of chart that the minister would have been given when they signed off that policy said it would do, which is increase poverty amongst families with 3 or 4 or 5 children, almost all actually 3 children. And and those families, if we then look, and you might think, oh, what is this poverty measure? It's not real. There's no poverty in Britain. Well, lots of surveys of those same families say we're talking about people not being able to have a winter coat. If you look at the OECD's recent survey of kids in schools, then 11% of British teenagers were saying they're skipping a meal a week. That's 2.6% in Portugal, right? And Portugal's a lot poorer than us as a country. So these things are real.
Really real. You mentioned the 2-child benefit cap, right? And I'd like to explore this more. So, we might as well just talk about it now. There's a tension here, isn't there, between, without sounding incredibly grandiose, Torsten Bell, the thinker, right? Torsten Bell, there we go.
You just got me shot in the street.
Problem with that, right? But Torsten Bell that writes books about the economy is in a very senior sort of think tank position, has the ear of politicians and thinks about these things in depth. And you're on the record. I read the piece in The Guardian that you wrote earlier this year, right, about getting rid of the 2-child benefit cap, but for the reasons you've just outlined. And I know the manifesto's not out yet. The Labour Party is saying they don't plan to visit it. And there is a tension there, isn't there, between thinking about these issues, thinking about how to resolve them, and then entering into the electoral political arena where there's compromise, there's other considerations. It's not as simple as saying, well, I've looked at this and here's what I believe the answer is. There's other things there too. How are you balancing that conflict and that tension going forward and going into this election?
Yeah, that is a good question. I've obviously wrestled with that a lot. Let's do the general how to wrestle with that, and then we should come on. I'm going to ask you a question specifically on the policy area you're referring to. And people say they want people with experience in politics. Well, one of the effects of people with experience in politics is they've said a lot of things, and you can go and read them. And journalists, I'm sure, Will and I have said a lot of things over the year just by virtue of being around a long time.
Yeah.
Look, so the big picture, first of all. When I've been thinking about this and thinking it is a big change, right? Not one I was necessarily expecting. Now, the compromise bit of it isn't the hard bit. So you are right. Elected politics is a different thing to running a think tank in lots of very different ways. It's very different.
Yeah.
In lots of really good ways. But there are, it's really nice, as an opportunity just to get to meet huge numbers of lovely people who will tell you about their lives and make the time. There's not a lot like it. But it is different, and it does involve more compromises. It's not just what does the Resolution Foundation think about this. It's what does a movement, a political movement, which includes the elected representatives, but other elements of the Labour movement, think about an issue, and how do you reconcile lots of different trade-offs, and how do you prioritise those, and that you own the trade-offs of governing.
Yeah.
Because running a think tank, I would hope we do aim to be in the Resolution Foundation focused on practical change that can be made. It's not pie in the sky stuff. It's like bread and butter economics, and that's what I hope I'll still be focused on. But we don't have to wrestle with all the trade-offs. We're not running for elected office, and we're not running the Treasury. So we set out what we think. We'll hopefully be honest about the trade-offs, but we don't have to resolve them all. Whereas politics and party politics is a team sport. It's a team sport. If you want to achieve anything in life and in politics, and in previous phases of life I've worked in politics, not in an elected way, then that is what it's about. And if you're not interested in that, well, that's what, then you can be a political narcissist, or you should stay writing books. And I've made that choice because, in the end, if you want change to happen, then there will be some compromises. And I think pretending that's otherwise is just being dishonest about that. And that is because, that's not because, politics is grubby and the rest. It's because you do things collectively. It's not just about like one individual decides this is what we're doing and then that's what happens, because then no one else would be part of the team. So that is what you need to happen. And actually you need the team to be much broader than the political party, because achieving anything in government involves lots of other people doing things. And so you've got to bring a lot of people with you. So on the compromise thing, I think that is inherent to politics. I think it's not something to be embarrassed about. Actually, I think I see politics. There's lots of different kinds of politics, right? There's the hot politics of the street protest and the having a clear slogan, and then there's the cooler. In some ways, people think the bit of politics they see, which is the kind of happens in rooms, the technocratic, the making decisions bit, but weighing up those arguments. Those are both important. You also need some hippies dreaming utopias as well, right? I want all those kind of politics, and you want the grassroots politics of councillors every day going out and making sure the bins are collected, right? So these are all different valuable parts of politics. And if you don't like that, well, I don't think you should be involved in it. I actually think the harder compromise, if I'm honest about having made this decision, is that it is a hard life. The bigger compromise is your family is asked to do a lot. So I didn't for one second wrestle with the you'll have to have collective positions, not individual positions. I'm a grown up. I'm much more wrestled with kids, wife, the rest, friends. I think that's a much bigger issue. Now, but I don't want you to think I'm not answering your questions on the 2-child limits. The 2-child limit is a really big deal. It has increased poverty. It's a terrible policy. It's done exactly what we knew it would do, and it's done it in a terrible way, and it's rolling out for years. I think all parts of the Labour Party think this is a terrible policy, and all parts of the Labour Party will want to see it abolished at some point. But, coming back to my compromise point, think about what the Labour Party is doing in saying this election. It's saying we're not going to, because people are so pissed off, because politics is in such a dire state, people don't believe change can come, we are not going to make promises we can't tell you where the money is coming from. And that's where we are on this. We can't promise right now because we haven't identified the resources. We don't know exactly. I promise you, as someone that used to work in the Treasury and look at forecasts, they change all the time. Do we know that we can afford it? No. And so we're not going to make that promise. Do I hope that a Labour government is able to do that? Yeah, I do. And if you look at what Rachel Reeves and Wes Streeting and others have said, they've also said they hope that the 2-child limit can be abolished at some point, because it's a terrible thing that is being done. But a Labour Party that aspires to govern in a time when the public finances are strained and people's faith in politics is strained, is not making a promise it can't know it can keep.
Yeah, I think that's I understand the politics behind that decision, and I think, well, it's an interesting one, right? And you might not be able to speak about this in sort of the way that I'm going to now, but I think about, okay, election, first fiscal event, you get to a budget and you sort of can play this in a Cameron, Osborne first event, you go, oh my God, we've got in and it's way worse than we thought it ever was. We've looked at the numbers, we've got under the hood. Who's been in here? Some cowboy? What's the, oh mate, I'm sorry, the bill, yeah, it's gone up 10 times. You get in, you have your first fiscal event and you say, look, yeah, I know in the election we said we weren't going to raise income tax, VAT, national insurance, but actually the scale of the problems we face now mean, in fact, there is going to have to be some tax and some spend. So you go, for example, to the two-child benefit cap if you wanted to spend the money there, or whatever it is that Rachel Reeves decides her programme for government is going to be, and you can play it in that way. And I guess where I would invite you to comment, because I know you might not be able to talk about those things in the same way, is thinking about that gangbusters comment from Rishi Sunak that, in terms of, let's say, halving inflation, in terms of, let's say, the Tories' own fiscal rules to have debt falling as a share of their GDP.
I'm glad you started on the fiscal rules, not me. That's like,
well, I'm conscious that last time you came on,
everyone just started snoring.
Yes. No, last time you came on and we spoke about fiscal drag, and people fucking loved it. It was, whatever you're into.
People have got, we've all got our issues.
Yes, people are into whatever they're into. But you are someone, again, who has studied the economy, and I would sort of invite your comment on whether Rishi Sunak's analysis is correct. I suspect you'll say it's not. But also sort of how a Labour government coming in might look to address some of these problems.
Okay, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
So let's do the, because I'm not sure, so in politics terms, people do, I've heard journalists talking in those terms, right, saying like, okay, you come in, you say it's all awful. You don't need to come in. You can see it's awful now. Like, you haven't got to knock on many, many doors to hear that. That's what's going on. There's record homelessness. You've got, as I said to you, wages stuck where they were in 2008. In Wales, they're still below where they were in 2008. The public finances are shot. We've got double the level of debt we had in 2010. So you don't need, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, why am I standing? Because Britain is in a hole economically, and there's only so many times you can write that before you start thinking maybe you need to pull your finger out and do something about it. So, I get why people in politics terms talk in those terms, but I don't think it is really a get in and see that, things are really difficult. Then on Rishi Sunak, again, and I want to, I'm a reasonable person, so obviously some of what he's saying is true, right? So inflation has come down, thank God. But inflation is significantly down. It's not double digits. It's within kicking distance of our target. One of the reasons the elections happened earlier than lots of us were probably expecting, unless you were a kind of genius with a ball, but I definitely wasn't expecting it. I thought it was possible, but I thought it was much more likely to be in October. But I think one of the reasons it's happened is because there's a decent chance, not just that the small boats keep rising over the summer, but inflation ticks back up a bit.
Yeah.
Not substantively, but enough to give you, political problems for a prime minister. But inflation has definitely come down. There are still some questions about what's happening in the service sector, but I think probably the most likely scenario is that inflation has come down. That isn't the problem with what Rishi Sunak says. The problem is that he then says, happy days. We should all be really happy. And people aren't happy. And why are they not happy? Because prices have gone up by 22% over the last 2 years. That's 11 years worth of inflation in 2, right? That's why people are upset. And then the cost of essentials, which are in the end the things that matter most to poorer households, are up in the case of food by 30%. People say everywhere. There's a guy in Swansea on 3 days ago. So he's unemployed at the moment, but he's been working recently. He even owns his own house. But he's been out of work the last month or so. What did he want to talk about? Food prices. Because that's what he was struggling with right there. And then I think he was going to go and have to ask his mum and dad for help when he's into his 40s. So food prices, like, things are not going great because those price levels are high, even though inflation has come down. And then let's then go to your harder question, which is like, what happens after an election? And I would encourage everyone, this is voters, and this is a bit wordy, so don't start snoring over there. But like, this is the wordy bit, which is, how should we think about how we vote, right? And if you watch the BBC or whatever, you'll sound like you should think about it in terms of kind of retail offers by the parties, maybe a bit of like, do you trust their retail offers? I mean, there's not nothing in that, and you definitely want to know that have they got serious plans, like, you know, shock, the Reform Party do not have serious plans. Slight shock, the Lib Dems have funny ones, like, you know, all the rest. But like, yeah, judge it a bit on that. You know, if they've got bad plans, don't vote for them. If the plans don't add up at all, that you should ask questions. But the most important thing is to judge those people as potential leaders, because you don't know what the world's going to look like. It's not about like in a few months, does it? Like, I'll give you an example. We knew that Boris Johnson was what you would technically call a shyster, right? We all knew that. Every Conservative MP knew that, okay? But he was made Prime Minister because they thought he would help win an election in 2019. And then within weeks, we were into a pandemic, when having a shyster for a Prime Minister is a big problem. So if we vote for people and don't pay attention to their characters, their judgment, you know, what they're telling us about themselves, stuff will happen in the world. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I'm not as fussed on what happens in the first few months. What matters is anyone going to be able to start moving Britain forward rather than backwards, and be able to do that when stuff happens? Bad stuff that I have no idea what that stuff is right now. And that is what people should be judging. Is that person, when bad stuff happens, be it geopolitics or anything else, going to be the right? And actually, lots of people do judge it like that. But our politics doesn't talk, or the media does not talk in those terms. But that is what it's about. Anyway, that was a bit worthy.
Do you think so? It's really interesting to hear you say that, like that sort of appeal to a more kind of, I guess, presidential politics, right? That does pit a Rishi Sunak versus a Keir Starmer.
Well, no, judge the team. Judge the team. Judge the team and the party. Are they in? No, because it really matters if the party's a complete state, right? You can't.
Well, yeah.
You know, whatever people think about Rishi Sunak, one of the reasons he's having a tough time is because there's a load of mad people, right, running around shouting at him. And if if we were in here and your team were screaming at you, you'd probably be put off a bit and not be on your best performance. So if I'm Rishi Sunak, I'm thinking, it'd be nice if Liz Truss kind of disappeared for a bit. But unfortunately, she's about to be a Conservative candidate in the coming election. So. No, the team does matter. I'm not arguing for presidential policy. I'm arguing for pay attention to the micro policies. Some of them are really important, right? I think there's lots of ones that are really important. I'm not going to start listing them because you'll definitely get bored. But also take a judgment on, can you trust these people to run the country and the economy and the public services in the face of things that you and I can't predict?
I've traditionally finished these conversations, actually, the last couple you've had here, and I've said to you, are you going to run for the Labour Party? We know the answer to that one now.
So do I.
Yes.
It's been a busy few weeks. Thanks for the. It's been a very busy few weeks.
But I will continue the theme of asking you about your candidacy. Slightly more challenging one of, are you going to run? Which is kind of about this point of local party democracy, right?
Yeah.
And people have accused you of being parachuted into Swansea. So how do you defend your candidacy there? Talk about that. Do you think it's appropriate that the shortlists, the way that they've selected it, that you're the right candidate to stand in that constituency?
Well, obviously, I think I'm the right person to be the MP, for Swansea West, and that's because I think I can make a real difference. And actually, there's actually a whole great team in Swansea. There's a really strong council. Again, you should be in Swansea, come and see it. Lots of development is happening because of a great council in Swansea, led by a great leader, Rob Stewart, who's made a real difference under the radar, but doing the hard work day in, day out. And I think having a Labour MP, me in this case, will help support that work and make a real difference. In terms of the process, the Labour Party has its processes. You'll have probably paid more attention than most human beings should or have to those, but you put in an application and then a panel from the Welsh Executive Committee and some local members, so 3 from the executive, 2 from the local party, make a decision on the basis of people that have put in their list. And, I'm very glad they've decided that I should be their candidate. And every single member I've met over the last few weeks, and actually most voters, not every voter, but most voters have been nothing but lovely. I've been sleeping in their bedrooms, I've been eating their food, and I couldn't be happier to be working with those people, because the team is what will deliver for Swansea in the same way that I'm saying to you, we need a team to deliver for Britain and Wales.
Torsten Bell, thank you so much for coming in. I do as a matter of sort of regulation and doing my job well, I have to read out the other candidates.
Oh, come on then.
In
Let's have it.
In
Let's have
Swansea
them.
West. So obviously, for a start, there's you for the Labour Party.
I should say, by the way, it's a clean fight.
Yes?
Everyone's behaving reasonably.
So far.
And that's good politics.
Still a lot of time to go.
No, I've got faith in them.
Okay. Torsten Bell is standing for the Labour Party. This is the Swansea West candidates list. Tara Jane Sutcliffe, the Conservative. Gwyn Williams for Plaid Cymru. Mike O'Carroll for the Lib Dems. Patrick Benham Crosswell for Reform. Peter Jones for the Greens. And Gareth Brummel for the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. Those are the candidates in Swansea West. Torsten, Great Britain, how we get our future back.
Do you know what we should do?
What?
Get our future back.
Yes, we should.
Don't you think?
Maybe there's an opportunity that people will have at an upcoming general election to vote accordingly. Thank you so much for coming
Thank you very much for having me, as always.